you have to give space for people to learn and to make mistakes and fail fast and then learn fast and then move on to the next thing. And we made so much progress so fast this year. And I think in some regards, it might well have been that I did leave.
Welcome, everyone, to the Real Leaders Podcast, where today impacts tomorrow, departure creates opportunity, and leaders keep it real. That excerpt was from David Young, the CEO of Participate Learning, who shares with you the lessons learned from deciding to hand over the reins, the importance of becoming bilingual, and how his family values manifest in their company's culture and customers. Enjoy. And then with that, how about we get started here?
All right.
Okay, I'll do a little introduction and ask you the first question, and we'll go from there.
Awesome.
All right, here we go. Kev, come on, Kev. You got to bring the energy today. All right, here we go. Countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is David Young, the CEO of Participate. David, a pleasure having you back on the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to see you again. Appreciate you having us on and keeping us involved.
And for our listeners out there who are devoted to the podcast, David was on episode 38, and David, you really shared about the origin of Participate, having your family being education. Was this a model that could be repeated? Sure, it's been done in college. Why not do it K through 12? The beauty in indifference, bringing or having a Finnish exchange student. And after you have a Finnish exchange student, why not have one from Sweden? How culture attracts culture. Why not want to work for a company where you can go to a different location, be immersed in the culture and make a difference in someone's lives? But David, someone told me the other day that this is a leadership podcast. So I think maybe we ought to talk about leadership today. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, just to clarify, since we last talked, we did spin off our digital division as Participate, and so our traditional business is now known as Participate Learning, and so we'll get that information to you. But it's participatelearning.com now. So the other organization is pursuing a digital education strategy that's taking it in a different direction.
So then a lot has changed since we last spoke. Would you mind filling this in? Tell me what's changed in this past year?
Yeah, so last time we talked, I was sitting in Costa Rica, and it was lovely. Took my family down there to live effectively the mission that we pursue as an organization. I wanted my children to have a bilingual, bicultural, biliterate educational experience, and felt like that was critical to their future to, have that experience to speak Spanish, not only to take it, but to actually speak it. And as you may know, being immersed in another culture and language is a pathway to proficiency. So we took that on as a family. It was kind of a big thing for my board to take on and for me to take on. So our COO, Mark Otter, went with the new company, so spun off. I went to Costa Rica for 6 months, and we left the organization in the hands of relatively new leaders. And so one thing I learned about leadership is sometimes you have to give people a chance to learn. You got to give them opportunities to fail, opportunities then to succeed and learn from mistakes. And I thought it was really remarkable that my board was willing to provide me that kind of time to rejuvenate, to refresh, to get ready for the next 20 years of my career after already completing 25 years with the organization. So I thought that was really amazing for them to take that on. And then, I'm really proud of my own willingness to hand sort of the reins to relatively new leaders and give them an opportunity to prove sort of their skills, learn on the job. And to come back and then welcome me back and to help me to reintegrate over the summer. And it turns out, we just completed our finest year in 32 years of the organization's history, led by youthful leaders that have so much potential and the ability, I think, to take us to the next level nationally, to the next level of impact on students, and ultimately to help us create our next 32 years.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. That's pretty big, and I had no idea. I mean, the mark of a good leader for me is leaving an organization better than you found it. I think you maybe even talked about that in your last episode. If I were gone tomorrow, would our company be able to sustain today? And, tell me about that process, though. I mean, was it uneasy leaving something where you've been a part of for 25 years? What were some of the challenges?
It was, I think, quite uneasy for my board. They're quite accustomed to me. I've been here a while. Love what we do. I'm passionate about it. Have a great network in our footprint, and so to allow me and afford me the opportunity to depart, for a full 6 months, and it's not like I wasn't available and accessible, but we pretty much let the group, youthful group behind me, run with the show, and they proved that they could do a lot of great things, a lot of new things, a lot of innovation. I think the lesson I learned as maybe a more mature leader these days, which is kind of hard for me to believe, but anyway, is that you have to give space for people to learn and to make mistakes and fail fast and then learn fast and then move on to the next thing. And we made so much progress so fast this year. And I think in some regards, it might well have been that I did leave.
Interesting. So I'm just trying to think here, like the growing pains were uneasy. What about this new leadership group strikes you the most in terms of their qualities of being a leader and what they were able to bring to this company? You mentioned innovation was one. What are a couple other things that they've done differently that you never really expected that they could really pull out?
Data. They are data driven. They are constantly surveying. They're customer driven. They're looking for facts and acting on those facts. So there's very little in this group that is unproven. They don't make decisions without fully understanding our customer's perspective and having numbers to back it up. I think that's been a really significant change here. Not always welcome across the board. Some of us, still want to operate with our guts, but
right.
And sometimes you have to do that too. But data, backed by gut, I think is even more effective. And so they've really brought that to the table. Their technology capacity is it's the next generation is just so much more agile. They have new ideas for management structure and how we can create various communication vehicles. They're so collaborative. I mean, one of the craziest things we did the day I left, before I got on the plane, I told them I wanted them to run a process through the time I was away until the time I got back to create our next strategy plan. We were culminating a 5-year plan just last December, and I wanted a new one ready for this month, 2020. And so I put them in charge of running that strategic planning process. And the only caveat I said is every single staff person has to be given an opportunity to participate in this process. All the board members, all the shareholders must be included. Passed it off to them to run this amazing collaborative process, which yielded our next, actually, we've got a 2-year plan because everybody knows 5 years is split far out. But they did such a brilliant job of pulling in all our staff, all our departments, all our shareholders, all our board members to be part of this process. And it was really, I think, for morale purposes, for earning their stripes, for earning credibility internally and externally, I think it was a very good move, and one that I I don't know if I would have done that when I was younger. I guess I've reached a point where I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to give that responsibility to them. Or maybe it's just really hard to do, and I wasn't ready to do it myself. But they really handled that super well, and I'm extraordinarily excited about our future. I think we've got bold plans that are achievable, that are meaningful, and really could transform the next generation of students to be global citizens.
That's really cool. When I think of data, a lot of people are scared with their own personal security, and the objectiveness is what you like, and to never go with your gut is what you alluded to. But the one thing about data is that as people, we are always changing. And you mentioned on the last podcast, the only constant is change. So how do you prepare for like a 5-year plan like that? And when change happens, what are some strategies to adapt and maybe avert from the plan?
Well, you can't wed yourself to a 5-year plan and expect it to go through as written, right? So there's constant check-ins on progress, constant review of the performance indicators, constant review of the objectives and the initiatives to ensure that they remain valid. And so that's going to be, again, customer feedback and understanding external market conditions and what might affect that. I mean, for us, it could be regulatory change. It could be a change in immigration policy. There could be changes in education budgets, things of that nature. And so you constantly have to monitor those things. And we spend a lot of time and effort and, frankly, money, looking at government relations, looking at, our lobbying efforts to make sure that we're understanding policy that's coming down and that we never get surprised. But you can't have a 5-year strategy plan anymore, given the pace of technology change, because, obviously overnight, something that you did a couple of years ago can be completely outdated. We've had that throughout our 30 years. I mean, I remember when we first got I might have told you this before, we first got our plain paper fax machine in like the mid or late 90s. And I remember crying because I no longer had to receive applications from all over the world with that foil paper that you're probably too young to remember. I remember we used to have to book airline tickets through travel agents and go pick them up. There's so many things that are changing, and it's changing even faster now. So I would say that any leader that's building out a strategy plan to think beyond 2 years is probably just kind of getting a general framework in mind, but that by year, probably the second year, even third year, you're having to kind of adjust on the fly.
Dave, you've been mentioning a lot about this new group coming in being very customer centric. If you go to any Impact conference, obviously part of the Real Leaders Impact Awards, you go to any Impact conference, there's going to be someone there that's going to be talking about how do you measure impact. So in terms of your customers and the impact that Participate Learning is trying to create, how do you measure that? Yeah,
so we have some very obvious measures that our customers like. So every school district and every school is looking for students to progress in math, science, and reading. Fortunately for us, our programs, our global education programs, have significant impact in those areas. And so we're typically able to report to customers that if you adopt our programs, your reading and math scores are going to go up significantly with the impacted student groups. So that's one way. A second way is one of our programs delivers intense language study through what's called dual language immersion. As you know, 99% of U.S. citizens that take language in our public schools never learn to speak that language. That was from an article in The Atlantic in 2016 called America's Lacking Language Skills. And that article cites a 1% effectiveness rate in, probably you had the same experience. A lot of people listening, 3 years of X language and I can't speak it. Why we continue to abide by that and think that's okay, I don't know. If that were our math outcomes, if that were our science outcomes, people would be up in arms, you know? We know what works, and that's immersion methodology. And so one of our flagship programs is to deliver immersion programs in public schools. And what we see out of that program is not only increased data outcomes on math, science, and reading, but we also see these kids have extraordinary proficiency in the language. So they're actually learning to speak Spanish or Mandarin or French, as the case may be. And we can measure that. There are scales to measure proficiency. And for instance, after 6 months in Costa Rica, I was able to improve my level from advanced low to, not advanced low, from intermediate low to intermediate high in 6 months of being sort of on the ground. The students in our programs should be advancing to a category of advanced low proficiency within these immersion programs. By comparison, a program that would be a traditional sort of high school program, kids are never going to get out of the beginning levels. So that data is really valuable to schools and districts and notably to parents that want their kids to learn a language.
That's an interesting thought. People will be up in arms if this were math or English or science, and that's so true.
Well, and it's $5 billion. It's a $5 billion industry.
$5 billion industry.
Yeah, I mean, as a country, we spend $5 billion trying to teach languages with a 1% effectiveness rate.
I mean, I'm naive to say that as well, because I took French for 7 years and I can't speak a lick of French. I mean, I'd probably have to go to France and figure it out, but no, it's pretty bad.
I mean, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? Because I mean, your story, my story, that is the U.S. story on language learning.
Yeah, exactly. So for business owners who have, sons or daughters in school right now, what if they want, if their kids want to be in business or they want to have a career, what language would you recommend that they learn?
I mean, and it depends where you are in the U.S. I mean, in North Carolina, it's clear that Spanish is a real need and has real opportunities attached to it. I would think that's true in most states. There are places where I believe Mandarin is quite valued. And then I think on the West Coast, the language potential could be much more varied and possibly in big cities as well. But there are a lot of sayings out there that if you can speak Mandarin, Spanish, and English, you can communicate to probably 95% of the world. Wow. You could replace Spanish with French and say the same things in Mandarin, French, and English. So Mandarin plus English plus one other language gets you a vast majority of the world.
David, you mentioned immigration policy. How have new immigration policies affected your organization? How have they affected them? And then as well as when people reach the 12th grade, your students are from foreign countries, they reach the 12th grade. At least I know we've had some friends from Guatemala. I had a friend from Guatemala that needed to get a job within 90 days to stay in the country. How has immigration policy affected participants' learnings? And what are some of the fears that a lot of the students have in terms of, getting deported back to their country?
Yeah. So we function within the cultural exchange umbrella of the U.S. Department of State. And so from a regulatory standpoint, things have been the same as they've always been. Some of our teachers have had some not so pleasant experiences of being asked why they are here, or even told that they should go home. Very few, though, relatively speaking. We've been a little surprised, given the climate, that we haven't seen more of that, and maybe relieved. And so I think in general, our teachers have had very positive experiences. They are, very high-level educators. They're bilingual, typically quite sophisticated. So I think they they have very winning personalities and are highly valued in these programs because they play a specific role around linguistic expertise or cultural exchange expertise. So I think we've been fortunate to not yet to have not seen any negative impact. But obviously we're keeping an eye on it and occasionally wary.
David, I think on our first podcast, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you told me that your parents were in education and that, I don't know if you started Participate Learning with them, but they had some involvement in Participate Learning. Is that correct?
The concept of what used to be called visiting international faculty, which became Participate and then Participate Learning, it's complicated. Visiting international faculty was sort of an outcropping of cultural exchange program for professors at Elon University in North Carolina, where my father was president. And so they were eager to host international professors as part of kind of the student experience. And the idea to bring international teachers K-12 really stemmed from that experience.
Okay, got it. And the reason I asked that is because our next edition coming out is Families Who Lead. And a big theme of that is generational leadership and that being passed down. Now, you mentioned that, this process of leaving, the helm of the organization for 6 months was difficult. Did you stress at all having the family values in the company, and how is the company able to sustain those core values?
Well, I mean, the company really is it is our family. We believe in that global citizenship is as simple as knowing someone from another place, appreciating their culture, being able to step in their shoes and understand what their lives are like. It's all about empathy, all about appreciation and curiosity about the world. And it reflects my family's dedication to seeking travel experiences around the world, seeking to learn other languages, seeking to study regions of the world. I grew up, my siblings and I grew up with map wallpaper all over our rooms. That was, all of us were surrounded by maps like all day long. And, we memorized capitals. When we took trips, we were competing to see who could name, all the capitals of the world and had games around geography and culture and language. So this is kind of just who we are as a family. And there's no doubt that this has been a family effort. My brother was heavily involved. My sister was at one point the director of recruitment for us. My mother was our original accountant. The ideas came from my father's work at Elon, and he's been chair of our board for 30 years now. So when we go on holidays, we have to have a jar out to prevent us from talking about the organization nonstop, because my mother goes crazy. Because we can easily get hung up to talking about nothing other than Participate Learning. So it's been a lot of fun. My family's very lucky, very fortunate, and we believe that the opportunities we have had are deserved by all students, and that's what we're trying to do, is extend it much more broadly to students that may never leave the country.
When you were, taking this on 25 years ago, was it ever challenging with your parents to you can't have a normal conversation since it's always around the business? How'd your relationship change with them? Kind of tell our audience about your experience growing up with your parents heavily involved. Well,
after the initial couple of years, my brother and I really kind of took on most of the work. Eventually, my brother went on to do some other things, and so I had about a 7-year period on my own with some other new colleagues that I brought on before I was able to convince him to come back in the late 90s. They pretty much, once we kind of got it up and running as a family project, and then things kind of seemed to emerge and take off. They pretty much let me run with it. When my brother came back, we developed the organization together for a number of years until 2005 when he departed again. So since then, I've been CEO. They both, all my family remain on the board and involved, but I think as long as I don't drive the thing into the ground, they seem pretty happy. And so far I've been able to bring on people that have similar beliefs, have similar passions. Global education is kind of one of these things where people get really into it. And when you love it, you truly love it. And so finding people that want to dedicate their careers to impacting students and giving them these experiences, they're not a dime a dozen, but when you find them, and when you find them, it's our culture and our mission and our passion for global education keeps people around for a while.
Well, it's nice. The reason I asked that is because I found a lot of the guests we've had on the show, especially these purpose-driven companies. There's two routes. Like you found your purpose. You're surrounded by maps all day. It's in the family organization. You're lucky to have that. Obviously, you've said that, but you're lucky to have that purpose that you've been able to follow throughout your career, and you've been really, really talented at it. Whereas others on the show will come on and they were in some other organization, whether it's investment banking or finance or just some career that they made a lot of money, but they wanted to have this change. What do you hope for your children?
Well, it's early. They're 14 and 12 and still developing, I think, their interests. I hope that they'll appreciate the work we do here, and I hope that they'll want to be what we call global citizens as well, and really striving to make the world a better place, to solve global challenges and that may be for them, but more importantly, respecting people from all nations and people of different backgrounds. I think that's critical for us to one, solve many of the challenges we face across the planet and saving the planet, and then ultimately to have peace. We really need people to have a skill set that allows them to interact effectively despite the backgrounds of whoever it is they're working with or whoever it is they're with in general. So, I hope that they'll feel like they are citizens of the world and that they have a role to play in helping us all to succeed.
David, you mentioned everyone that participates is a part of the family. Well, how is that family culture in your organization, would you say, different from maybe a standard corporation? And is there an example that maybe comes to your mind?
I've never worked anywhere else, so I'm not entirely sure. I can guess based on what I'm told here. We really stress family, so we have, we'll have a Thanksgiving dinner for staff. We'll have, we'll have regular opportunities to interact. We bring all our families together regularly. We celebrate our mission. We celebrate accomplishments, both personal and professional. We strive to be very, very family friendly with our policies, whether that's, bereavement policies or taking care of an elderly parent or, different types of insurance, that you might not necessarily see in a standard organization. We've been named locally as a family-friendly organization for a number of years, and I think that you may be aware we're also a B Corp Best for the World organization, and a lot of what they look at is how we strive to ensure our employees are well cared for. What I believe is that there's a group of people in the world that want to use their careers to do good. And, a lot of what we see in using business as a force for good also applies to people that want to use their careers as a force for good. And while that doesn't mean they'll take a significantly lower salary, it may be that they're looking for kind of the whole experience the whole compensation of the kinds of benefits they can get, the kind of work-life balance they can get, what's that going to mean for their family. And I think we do a really good job with that, and that it's meant quite high retention over the years, and I think quite high satisfaction. And, at a time of 3.8% unemployment here in North Carolina, we really aren't having any difficulty recruiting high levels of talent. I'm finding that a lot of people want to work here, and that talent level is as high as it's ever been.
High talent, high retention, good mark of a good leadership. Dave, the last question for you today is, what is your definition of a real leader?
Well, I gave
you had a whole list last time.
I gave a long answer last time. This time I think thinking about organizations and the role they can play in society, I think for leaders to be thinking of how their organizations can align to helping to resolve global challenges and issues. And we talk about people being global citizens, but I think that organizations and leaders can also be global citizens. And the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations gives us all kind of a working list or a to-do list of what it is we need to accomplish as humans. And I think businesses, organizations are well positioned to drive some of that work, if not all of that. And it just can't be left to NGOs and nonprofits. Altruistic for-profits need to play a role in solving the world's challenges. And that doesn't mean that you cannot be successful financially. You can do well through doing good. And I think leaders that can focus on the big picture and the whole impact of their organization beyond just the profit line, right? So what is the impact you have on your employees? What is the impact you have on the environment? Is your work truly making the world a better place? Are you impacting the next generation? What opportunities are you giving your team to become leaders, not just in title, but in empowerment? How are they empowered to make a change in the world for the better? I think leaders that can see maybe that bigger picture have an opportunity to emerge as, I think, the real leaders going forward.
Well, David, we appreciate you coming on the show today. Appreciate organizations and more organizations similar to yours that are, harnessing capitalism to sustain the planet, people, and profits. For David Young, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, use your organization as a private servant to sustain the people, planet, profit, people. It's a force for good. And always, never forget, keep it real. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Kevin.